Wuller, Oklahoma. Y'all, I know it's close to lunch, but I really appreciate your full attention. That means the world to me. I made it this far, and I'd like to get your full attention. Did you know that 1 billion people around the globe go to bed hungry every night? World population is expected to be 9 billion by the year 2050, and with that, agricultural production must increase by 70% to keep up. Congress, in its infinite wisdom, decides to provide millions of dollars in short-term assistance to underdeveloped countries for only 2 to 3 years in any given community, and proceeds to leave the area without any means of sustainability. These underdeveloped, undernourished, and unhealthy countries get a box of medical supplies and a couple packages of Insta meals that, sure, nourish them for the time being, but when you start with a village of 150, nourish them for 3 years, and end up with a village of 200 due to the increase in birth rates and the increase of people surviving, and then leave them, you now have 200 people instead of 150 people who can't provide for themselves. Essentially, we're perpetuating the number of sick and starving people in these underdeveloped countries. Clarification, this does not cut funding to humanitarian aid. It reallocates it to programs that are already in place that deal with developing sustainable means. Each of these programs is geared directly at the country that it's provided in, whether that be agriculture, whether that be infrastructure, whether that be mining. But it's going to be different for each country so that the country benefits. This doesn't stop nonprofits from contributing direct aid. They give 90% of the direct aid. So people will still be provided with meals. This is just making sure that we're smart with our money in the long run so that someday we can stand next to a country that we used to give humanitarian aid to and that they can be sustainable for themselves. And with that, I yield the remainder of my time to my summation.
Thank
you, Sir Chair. Andrew Edwards, Commonwealth of Virginia. Are there current RUTFs that are efficient means to feed these underdeveloped countries?
Can you clarify?
They're ready to use therapeutic foods.
I'm not aware of that in reference to this proposal. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Senate Wisconsin delegation. Thank you, Chair. You said that 90% of the aid in underdeveloped countries comes from nonprofits, but doesn't the United States contract those nonprofits to operate there?
No, this is 90% that strictly do not deal with the United States.
Robbie Moore, Republic of Texas. Will it be an easy process reallocating these funds from the government to these programs?
Yes, because these programs are already in place under United States control.
For Alabama, why only restrict them to underdeveloped countries and not developed countries?
Delegate, that's a debatable question.
I apologize.
Similar to the Republic of Texas, are there any law firms instead of
Delegate, that's a debatable question. Are there any more questions on the floor? The chair recognizes Trotter and McVeigh first.
Cameron Taylor, Republican of Texas. What exactly are these specific programs that do with infrastructure that we're moving this funding to?
Like I said, it's different for every country, but the programs that I have are Food for Peace and Feed the Future, and some of those deal with giving agricultural machinery and stuff so that they can provide farming for themselves.
Trotter, Oklahoma, my question was answered.
Are there further questions on the floor? The chair recognizes Clough Weaver.
Mexico, is the U.S. currently doing anything besides directly supply to these countries?
Yeah, each of these programs that are set in the bill, or set in the proposal, already give other forms other than direct aid.
For Mississippi, the money that we're currently using now to aid countries, what would we be doing with it?
Like I said, it's going to agricultural education and agricultural sustainability, so giving them livestock instead of giving them packages, giving things that will
Thank you, Delegate.
carry.
With that, time for technical non-debatable questions has elapsed. The chair will recognize the first speaker. The chair recognizes Delegate Sheehan. So reserved.
I actually visited one of the countries on this list last spring. I went to Uganda, and while I applaud this proposal because there is a need for reallocation of some of the funds, I believe that what I witnessed there would not be able to, the country would not be self-sustainable by 2020 without packages and aid from the United States. Until you visited one of these developing nations, there's no way you can understand the extreme poverty that exists in these nations. I witnessed children coming up to me and begging for a simple piece of candy. There's no food to go around. Families with 8 or more children are trying to feed their neighbors, they're trying to clothe each other. There is absolutely no resource that they have for themselves. And while it's great to try and make countries self-sufficient, unfortunately, these people don't have the education, they don't have the knowledge, nor is the infrastructure, or at times the red clay is not conducive to growing food to feed this huge population. And I would really encourage you to rethink this proposal. Thank you. I yield my remaining time.
Delegate, there's insufficient time. With that,
Thank you. Thank you, Sir Chair. I reserve the right to yield the remaining time to my fellow delegate from Oklahoma.
so reserved.
What we need to see here is that this is going to be a long-term effect, because of what happens in these countries is when the immediate aid comes down, the upper extremists come down, and I like to give an example from the movie Black Hawk Down. If you've seen it, when they dropped the food, the upper extremists took it and they had nothing left. So I urge you to vote low for this proposal. Thank you. I'd like to go Trotter, Oklahoma.
I'm sorry, Delegate, you were not yielded to. With that, we will move to a con speech. Are there such speakers? And before the chair recognizes, and amendments are in order and will be in order for another 5 minutes.
Pfeiffer, Alabama. In lines 30 to 31, it states that underdeveloped countries are harmed by our services, and justifying it with teach me to fish, he fishes for life. But in lines 42 on, it states that phase out the Food for Peace program, a program strictly to feeding underdeveloped countries. And if the sentiment of teaching men to fish were true, why suspend it only to underdeveloped countries and not developed countries as well? And I urge you to rethink the sentiments of this bill. And with that, I yield the remainder of my time.
Thank you, Delegate. The chair will now entertain a pro speaker. The chair recognizes Delegate Conklin.
Delegate Conklin, Wisconsin delegation. Through you, Chair, and I'd like to reserve my right to use my time to the delegate from Florida.
So reserved.
A lot of delegates have brought up the point that the teacher man to fish saying is inaccurate. We are not necessarily focusing on developed countries, true, but this is a start. And although it may seem extreme, while it may seem that countries may not be able to sustain themselves right away, the focus of this proposal is to phase it out. It's a slow and gradual process, not an immediate change. And as such, I thought that was an important point to bring up, and I yield the rest of my time to the delegate.
Thank you, previous speaker. My name is Alec Polanski, and I am from Florida. As the author has stated, that 90% of the aid that is going to these countries is coming from outside non-profit organizations. So, as a previous delegate said, that without the food coming in, then there would be no food. Well, that's not true, because the outside non-profits, are the ones that are providing food. So they will still have food. It's just making sure that our government is spending our money to ensure that we're not buying into short-term helps. We don't want to put a Band-Aid on this. We want to help them so that in the future, as well as right now, they can become a developed nation so that they won't need our help and they'll be able to stand on their own. Thank you, and I yield the remainder of my time to the chair.
Thank you, Delegate.
Sydney Freeman, Molly UN delegation. Thank you, Sir Chair. Will the author yield to a series of questions?
Yes.
Okay, I was a little perplexed earlier, and I apologize, but I would just like to make sure that you were saying that these programs that you tend to reallocate funds, you're saying that these programs are already in the United States and have already been established in these countries?
Yes.
Okay, and so with that, I would like to say that even though I am a full proponent of reallocating the budget, since there's just money floating around most of the time, I do
Delegate,
wonder.
please display your placard.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I do, however, question whether or not this reallocation of funds will last long enough to do this phasing out. And I do hope that, in a way, that if this money, okay, no, never mind. I give the rest of my time to the chair. Let me to the delegate. I'm sorry.
That's about the use of delegation. Thank you, Sir Chair. Most of the countries on this list.
Sorry, Delegate. The time that was not. She did not reserve the right to yield that time.
Trotter, Oklahoma. I reserve my right to yield the remainder of my time to Delegate Moore.
That's your right.
Thank you.
Trotter, Oklahoma. Now I'd like to talk to you the reason that I noticed many of the nations on this list are actually based in Africa. The African problem right now is that whenever Europe moved out after post-colonization, they did not set up systems to ensure that these political boundaries would be kept, and groups have now been fighting for years and years, and it's caused turmoil in Africa. Specifically, I'd like to give an example in Rwanda. These rival war territories fight over basic supplies: water, food, guns, ammunition. If we were able to supply the governments and the people with food supplies, water supplies, then they would be able to control these war groups, and then there would no longer be an issue. So if you want to solve the problem in Africa and all the other underdeveloped nations of the world, I suggest you continue to push this bill forward and see if that's proposal. Excuse me. And I yield the remainder of my time to Delegate Moore.
You've yielded 35 seconds.
Robbie Moore, Republic of Texas. I want to say a couple of quick things. These countries need help, and it is the right thing to do. This proposal is brilliant because it wisely distributes money to these countries and where the countries need it. We aren't just giving them food so that they can rely on us like a crutch. We're giving them money to different programs that will help it in the ways the countries need. Parents don't feed their children forever. We give it in the right way, and then they grow up and start living.
Without surpassing the New delegation, I reserve my right to yield my time to another delegate.
That's your name.
Okay. So most of the countries on this list, they're in economic problems because their governments are so corrupt. Let's list a couple. Ghana, Malawi, Rwanda, Uganda, Haiti, Somalia. All these countries are corrupt governments. So now, the problem, I agree with the intent of the proposal, but let's look at proposal in the proposal number 1. It says that it's going to reallocate to the country in a different form of aid, just infrastructure or economic programs. So it's going to be going back to the government. So all this really does is provide and feed corruption. It does nothing to go back into the government. It does not develop infrastructure. It doesn't teach a man to fish, but just gives the people in power who are being corrupt and abusing the power that they have and giving them more aid. It does not help the people. This, while I agree with the intent of the proposal, it is completely counterproductive because it does nothing to actually help the people. It does nothing but feed corruption. I yield the remainder of my time to fellow delegate.
Paul Hudson from the state of Missouri. Thank you. And thank the chair. I think that this is a really interesting proposal, and I think that the intent of it is really good, but when we look at the Teach a Man to Fish clause, we have to understand that you can't teach a man to fish who can barely lift a fishing rod over his head. These countries are emaciated. They're at a level of poverty that we can't even begin to even consider here in the United States. It's ridiculously important that we understand that these countries need our help right now. We can teach them to fish in the future, but if they die before we can teach them to fish, then it won't be useful to anyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. With that, time for debate has elapsed. The author is recognized for a 2-minute and 13 second summation.
Wuller, Oklahoma, thank y'all for all the interesting debate, and I thank you for all the great points. I'd just like to clarify a few things. One, these programs are only set in place for 2 to 3 years, so it's not like each individual village is getting years and years and years and years of supplies from us, so pulling out is not going to cut them off, especially since 90% of the aid will still be given in the form of direct supplies from people other than the United States. This is saying that us as a country are going to provide means that are sustainable. We are phasing out parts of these programs. So I'm not getting rid of Food for Peace or Feed the Future. The parts that we're moving the money to happen within those organizations. And those organizations aren't given to the government. These are organizations within the United States aid development that are managed by the United States. This money stays within our system, within our control, and with our means, so that when we are going over there, we're not just handing the money to the government. This aid in developed countries, it's provided by a lot of church groups and it's provided by a lot of nonprofits. This is still going to be there. We're not leaving these people cold turkey. The problem with it now is that the United States is giving money, and we want to be able to look a country in the eye 10 or 20 years from now and say that we've helped them. When we continue to give them food, what's the incentive for them to do it for themselves? If we do this now, then 10 years from now, we can stand next to a country who no longer needs our full support, and they can pay it forward, and they can continue to do that for other people. The point of humanitarian aid is to underdeveloped countries, not developed countries. Each of these programs deals only with underdeveloped, and that's why I focused on them. I want to be able to really make a difference and make an impact on these communities, on each and every person that live in these societies. And to do that, we need to not just look out for them now, we need to look out for them for years to come. And with this, the United States is making that a priority. And with that, I thank you for your attention, and I thank you for getting me this far and all the support, and I would love to yield my time to the chair.
Thank you all.